Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to the nominees. Thank you for being here. Ms. Chung, let me start with you. You were talking just a minute ago, I think, about human trafficking with Senator Cruz. Is that right? Did I hear that right? And this has been a priority of yours, I think, in your work as U.S. Attorney. Is that correct? Fair to say?
Yes, Senator.
So you are on an advisory committee to the U.S. Attorney General, to Merrick Garland. Is that right?
Yes.
And you stated in your questionnaire that this advisory committee, and this is your quote, elevates the voices of U.S. attorneys in department policies. Have I got that right?
Yes.
And one of those policies is combating human trafficking, correct?
Certainly.
You have talked a lot about the importance of anti-trafficking efforts, and human trafficking, just so we're all clear, includes sex trafficking, of course, but also includes labor trafficking. Is that right?
That's right, Senator.
And you probably prosecuted some of these cases. Is that correct?
I have been involved in allegations of forced labor.
Yeah.
Cases involving allegations of forced labor.
Understood. So when we're talking about labor trafficking, we're also talking about kidnapping and human smuggling across the southern border. Is that right?
Cases of forced labor can certainly involve those types of activities.
So the New York Times reported just a month or two ago this fact, and I'm going to quote now from the Times: migrant smuggling on the U.S. southern border has evolved over the past 10 years from a scattered network of freelance coyotes into a multi-billion dollar, that's a billion with a B, multi-billion dollar international business controlled by organized crime, including some of Mexico's most violent drug cartels. And then the Times goes on to report about the cartels kidnapping children so that illegal immigrants can try to pose as asylum-seeking families. We've heard reports about women being abducted and raped as part of illegal immigration rings. We hear about cartels kidnapping and torturing other people, holding them for ransom until their relatives in the U.S. pay to have them released, and then illegally smuggling them into the United States. I'm sure you're familiar with this. I mean, this is the work that you do. All of this is human trafficking. All of it is tragic, and all of it is increasing. So here's what I'm coming around to. I'm just curious about your work with the Attorney General. Are you advising him to crack down on human trafficking at the border? Are you advising him to enforce our immigration laws at the border to stop this terror that is occurring with women and children in particular, but frankly, involving all people, labor trafficking, sex trafficking? Are you advising him to this on this topic and to this end?
Senator Hawley, as a member of the Attorney General's Advisory Committee, I can speak to the fact that I'm on that and that we do, when asked, provide input of the United States Attorney's community positions on issues.
Has he asked about this issue? Has he asked about, given your expertise in trafficking, has he asked about how to stop the crisis of labor trafficking and sex trafficking at our southern border?
Well, certainly violent crime is a very high priority for the Department of Justice, and one that is frequently discussed.
But does he have a plan to stop the trafficking at the border? Are you involved in that? Have you been involved in any work to develop a plan to stop the sexual exploitation of women and children, to stop the exploitation of migrant workers into this country, to stop the exploitation of these vulnerable populations by cartels and organized crime? Have you been involved in a plan, developing a plan to stop that at the DOJ?
And Senator, the reason I just want to be careful that I'm speaking to what I can talk about publicly, but of course I can't speak to deliberative or work product. But what I can say is that I have not been asked to weigh in on the specific issue that you have asked.
It's too bad. Go ahead.
However, as a member of the Department of Justice and as a United States Attorney, violent crime has been my top priority, and I have done much to try to address that.
Well, I'm disappointed that the Attorney General's panel has not looked at human trafficking, but I can't say I'm surprised, because this Attorney General and this administration, frankly, has turned a blind eye to the crisis at our border that comes at a very real cost, a very, very real cost that you know, because you've seen these crimes. You've seen the results of this, and you've seen the results of what happens when you allow organized crime and violent cartels to control our border and to use human beings as assets to be traded upon and exploited in order to drive their profits. And that's what's happening every day, and this administration's allowing it. Justice Montgomery Reeves, let me come to you just briefly. You've been asked several times, I've heard the questions about your work as co-chair of the Delaware Supreme Court's Diversity Strategic Planning Steering Committee. That's a mouthful, but you've been asked about this. I just want to ask you about one thing in the report. The report talks about how important it is for the Delaware Supreme Court, I'm going to quote now, to take steps to reduce implicit bias and identity threat in the court environment. And it goes on to say that one of the things that might reduce identity threat is to get rid of the historic portraits of some of the white justices who've served on the court. Can you explain to me what identity threat is and why getting rid of portraits of judges and justices who've served on the courts would help with that?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator. I am not familiar with the term identity threat, so I don't have an explanation I don't have a definition for you. I can give you a definition of.
It's in the report, though. I mean, I'm quoting, to take steps to reduce implicit bias and identity threat in the court environment. I mean, this is your report.
Well, I understand, but one thing that I've attempted to explain is that I didn't draft the report. We had an entire committee that was creating a report to be delivered to the Supreme Court.
You signed off on it, though, didn't you?
So there wasn't a sign-off necessarily on the report.
Your name's on it, though.
I understand. I was a co-chair of the committee, but I didn't draft all the words to the report. I didn't draft the recommendations to the report. The Supreme Court is considering the report, and we haven't done anything with that particular recommendation.
So you don't know what identity threat is?
Well, I did not put those words in there, and I'm not entirely sure what whoever drafted that specific one meant by that one.
It seems kind of crazy to me, I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.